What we're going to do is we're going to simplify rationals and we're going to find the excluded values. We've done it where it's just one fraction. Now we're going to be looking at two fractions. And the key to this whole lesson is factoring. If we're able to factor, then the rest isn't too bad. For this first one, we see that the x plus 5 can't be factored anymore, so we bring it down. Its denominator has an x in common, so that gives us an x minus 3. We have the special factoring pattern, x minus 3, x plus 3. And then since we have a trinomial, we're going to use the x method. Two numbers that multiply together give you negative 12, add up to negative 1, which would be negative 4 and 3. So we have x minus 4 and x plus 3. Now what we're going to do is we're going to cancel. And so we see the x plus 3's cancel, x minus 3's cancel. And so our answer is x plus 5. And then in the denominator, we have an x and then an x minus 4. Now, for the excluded values, it's what gives us 0 in the denominator. So for our first one, it would be 0. Our second one would be positive 3. Then what we have is 4 and negative 3. So looking at letter B, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to factor it. So we see the square roots would be x minus 11, x plus 11. We can factor out a 2x out of the denominator, and that gives us an x plus 1. We're going to factor out a 3x, so that gives us an x minus 3. And then the denominator is a trinomial. Two numbers that multiply together give us 33, add up to negative 14. It'd be negative 11, negative 3. Now the next part is we see what we can cancel, and the x minus 11s cancel. The x's cancel. The x minus 3's cancel. So we have a 3 and then an x plus 11, and then we have a 2 and an x plus 1. Looking at our excluded values, it's what makes the denominator equal to 0. So for our first one, since it's a monomial, that would be 0. Then we have negative 1. We have a positive 11, and we have a positive 3. Now for letter C, same thing. I see that they have a 3 in common, and that's x squared minus 1. So that factors as x minus 1 and x plus 1. Our denominator is a trinomial. Two numbers that multiply together give us 1, add up to 2, which would be 1 and 1. So we have x plus 1 and x plus 1. Our next one, we're going to multiply the 3 and the 1, and that gives us a 3 on top and a 4 on the bottom. So that would be 3 and 1. But since our leading coefficient is 3, we divide each of them by 3, and that gives us x plus 1 and 3x plus 1. For a denominator, we do the same thing. 3 times negative 2 gives us a negative 6 on top, and we have a negative 5 on the bottom. So that would be negative 6 and 1. We're going to divide them each by 3, and so that gives us x minus 2 and 3x plus 1. Now for the fun part, we get to cancel. So the x plus 1's cancel, the 3x plus 1's cancel, and the x plus 1's cancel. So what we have is a 3 and an x minus 1 over an x minus 2. Now we're looking for our excluded values. Excluded values is what gives us 0 for the denominator. So x cannot equal negative 1 for the first two. Then we have a 2, and then we have a negative 1/3. Now, for our next few examples, what we have is division. So we're going to be using keep, change, flip. We're going to keep the first fraction the same. And then we're going to change the division to multiplication. And we have 3x to the fourth, y to the negative 1, over 8x to the negative 2, y to the 6th. I'm going to multiply across. And that gives me 12x to the 9th, and then y to the 0. The denominator is 8x to the 0 and y to the 8th. The zeros just become 1. 12 over 8 reduces to 3 halves. And then that would be x to the 9th and y to the 8th. Now, when we're stating our excluded values, it's a little bit different because we have y's. So our excluded value, since it's a monomial, means that x cannot equal 0, but also y cannot equal 0, since we have two different types of variables. Looking at letter C, since it's division, I'm going to keep, change, flip. I'm going to flip and factor at the same time. So I have the 7x squared as a monomial, so it can't factor, but its denominator has a 2x in common, and that would be an x minus 4. I change it to multiplication. The denominator here flips to the top, so that becomes x minus 4, x plus 4. And then we have the 14x to the 5th. So when I cancel, I see that the x minus 4's cancel. The 7 becomes a 1. The 14 becomes a 2. The squared cancels, and then the 5 becomes a 3. So I have x plus 4 on top. On the bottom, 2 times 2 gives me 4. And then x and x to the third gives me x to the fourth. So when I'm finding my excluded values, it's what gives me 0 in the denominator. So x cannot equal 0, and then positive 4. This would be 0 again, but I also have to look up these because these were once in the denominator, so that's part of it. I already have 1 4, but I need the negative 4, and that gives me my excluded values. Our last one. Once again, what we're going to do is factor and flip at the same time. So I factor out a 3, and that gives me a 2x minus 3. I factor out a 3x, and that gives me an x plus 1. I change the division to multiplication. Since I have a trinomial, two numbers that multiply together give me 2, add up to 3, which would be 2 and 1. So I have an x plus 2 and an x plus 1. Notice it was in the denominator, but I brought it to the numerator because I'm dividing. Here I'm going to multiply the 4 and the 9, and that gives me 36. So two numbers that multiply together give me 36, add up to negative 12. That would be negative 6 and negative 6. I'm going to divide each of them by 4. 6/4 reduces to negative 3 halves. So that right there would give me 2x minus 3 and 2x minus 3. Now for the fun part, we cancel. 2x minus 3's cancel, x plus 1's cancel, and the 3's cancel. So our answer is x plus 2, and in the denominator we have an x and a 2x minus 3. And for the excluded values, x cannot equal 0 for the first monomial, then negative 1. And then what we have is 3 halves. And remember, this right here was in the denominator. We have a negative 2, and we already have a negative 1, so that would be it.